بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So let us now resume from where we had left off in the story of Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu anh. And I had basically mentioned the pre-caliphate stories of Ali. Now we get on to the Khilafah, and today we will talk about one of the saddest incidents in our Islamic history, and we'll continue the story next Wednesday, inshallah ta'ala. So Uthman radiallahu anh was massacred on a Friday, as we had said. And the same day, the mobs, many of them had left the city. Many of them had gone back to their lands, Iraq and Egypt. Primarily, these were the two places they were from. And many of them remained outside of the city. And immediately on the same day, Friday, talk began who would become the next Khalifa. It was chaotic. Obviously, Uthman radiallahu anhu had just been killed, massacred. And so people began to ask themselves who would be the next Khalifa. They went to a number of the prominent Sahaba. They went to people like Abdullah ibn Umar, and they said to him, your father was the Khalifa, you were the one appointed in charge of the Shura at the death of your father, so why don't you take charge of the Khilafah? And Ibn Umar radiallahu anh was always a very quietist, very low-key, apolitical figure his whole life. He was just a worshipper and a zahid. He never liked politics, and he really didn't get involved at all in politics. So he said, "La hajata li fi dhalik," which is the Arabic expression, I don't want this at all. Right? I have no concern in this. Don't even think about me. So they went to other senior members of the Sahaba. And of the Shura, there were still members alive. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was alive, Talha was alive, Zubayr were alive. These were all alive from the time of Umar ibn Khattab Shura. And they were all approached, and all of them said, I am not interested, don't even think about it, especially now the chaos has happened and whatnot. And as for Ali ibn Abi Talib, he had, on the day of Friday when he heard of the massacre, he had gone back to his house and locked himself in because he did not want any responsibility. He was worried what is going to happen, which is basically people are going to come to him. So he did not come outside for the whole day. The next day the people came and they started knocking on his door. And a crowd gathered outside his door, and they kept on knocking until finally when they were let in, they said that this matter, this affair of ours needs a leader. And there's nobody that we can trust other than you. There's nobody that we can trust other than you. And his first reaction was that find any other man that you guys approve of. And these are the people of Medina, the A'yan they called. These are basically the nobles of the city, the people that are involved. Every community has 4, 5, 6, 10 people that are the most active. So the nobles of the city, they come to Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ali says, go find anybody whom you like, and I will give him my oath of allegiance, and you shall find me the most noble helper to the Amir. I'll be the minister, I'll be whatever you want. Go find somebody else. But they said, no, we were not going to be happy with anybody other than you. And they mentioned all of his blessings. You are the son-in-law of the Prophet, you are of the Shura, you are this, and all of this is mentioned. So Ali ibn Abi Talib said, if this is the way you feel, then this bay'ah, this oath has to occur in public, not in my house. This isn't some type of secret gathering. It has to be done and everybody sees, and then if there's any issues or whatnot, it can be dealt with. And so they took him to the masjid against the wishes of some of the Sahaba who said maybe the rebels are still there, the chaos is still there. But Ali radiallahu anh insisted, this cannot take place in private in my house. It has to be done in front of all of the people. There can be no bay'ah in secret, he would say. Right? And by the way, pause here, footnote. So subhanAllah, look at this modern day pseudo-caliph. The Baghdadi guy, And this is exactly what he is doing. Who put him in charge? This is exactly. Ali radiallahu anhu said, I am not going to take bay'ah in a secret room with 10 people. That's not how a khilafah is done. People, the ummah has to approve. There has to be a shura. You can't just, come over and take over like this. So this is the fiqh of Ali radiallahu anhu. If only these modern, pseudo followers would understand. So He goes to the masjid, and it is announced that we have chosen Ali radiallahu anh, so everybody should come and give him the bay'ah. And eventually all of the Sahaba in Medina gave bay'ah to Ali ibn Abi Talib. Now there are some reports, now here's where we get I'm not going to go advanced, I'm not going to go into all these riwayat, but you should know that this era in particular has absolutely contradictory reports. This era in particular is full of narrations that are biased from all sides. And there's not just two sides, by the way. There's not just two sides. There's multiple, if you like, biases that exist. And it is very difficult, if not impossible, to navigate through. In any case, for this level, inshallah, I'm going to give a very cursory, very inshallah, easygoing analysis, and we're not going to go too deep. Just realize that other non-Sunni sources, they claim that Talha and Zubayr did not give the oath of allegiance, that they always, astaghfirullah, hated Ali. You understand that Talha and Zubayr, they are from our ashara, correct? But from the other side, they are not even Muslim, you understand? Yani the non-Sunni group, they really do not view these two as positive. In fact, they are, astaghfirullah, some of them consider them, a'udhu billah, kafir, because they fought against Ali, as we're going to talk about. But from our sources in Sahih Bukhari, and the most authentic sources, Talha and Zubayr, they eventually did give the oath of allegiance. It is perhaps true that they said, we will not give you the oath until the people have given. Meaning, it's not going to be a private matter that 10 people agree to. That we all have to agree, and we're not just going to give you until there's consensus. But in our sources, Talha and Zubayr radiallahu anhum, they gave bay'ah publicly to Ali on the minbar of the Prophet ﷺ in the masjid. So this is something that we do not doubt. Whatever the other group says, that is their business and their sources. Now this is when, so Ali radiallahu anh, basically the matter became clear that he is the Khalifa. This is when the divisions began for the very first time. And once again the problem comes, the reports are very, very sparse and they are contradictory. And there's 1,000,001 questions in the minds of every one of us. Even myself, every time I read these reports, some thought comes, why didn't he do this? Why didn't he say this? Why didn't he do that? And in the end of the day, we have to proceed from now on with the assumption that the Sahaba were there and we weren't there, and we trust their judgment, and they know what we do not know, and they saw what we cannot see, and they assess the situation that we are ignorant of. So we have to have a husn al-dhan, a positive attitude that they did what is best, even if we don't fully understand. Because honestly, every time I talk about this, or even when I myself read it, it's difficult not to question, why didn't Talha do this? Why didn't Ali do this? Why didn't Aisha do that? And it's so easy 14 centuries later to double guess. But we were not there. And each one, that's what our position is. As I said 1,000,001 times, we are agreed upon this in Sunni Islam. Astaghfirullah, none of them wanted to harm the Ummah or Islam. That's honestly, wallahi, it is illogical even to think this in light of their track record. It is illogical, and it is against our aqeedah, our theology, to think this. Obviously, the non-Sunni groups, they don't have this theology. They don't care if, astaghfirullah, they talk about the niyyah of Talha and Zubayr and Aisha, so they can go whatever they want in their imagination. But for us, it is very clear that their track records, Talha and Zubayr radiallahu anhum, are of the first converts from Mecca. They have participated in, and we're going to talk about their biographies in a few weeks inshallah, they have participated in almost every single battle. And the Prophet ﷺ's ahadith for them mutawatira. He said, Zubayr is my hawari, he is my disciple, right? And Talha was the one that was the primary defender at the Battle of Uhud. The Battle of Uhud, his right hand was paralyzed because of Uhud, because of his wounds at Uhud. He could not raise his hand up. And by the way, even when he gave bay'ah to Ali, he had to pick up his right hand and put it, because his right hand was paralyzed. Because his body, remember what he did, was defending the Prophet ﷺ. You're going to doubt him? I mean, honestly, wallahi, even just common sense, forget Quran and Sunnah theology, that's Sunni Islam, even common sense and track record, you're now going to assume that, astaghfirullah, they had some bizarre ideas about the Ummah. So we don't believe this. We're not going to, even, in my whole talk, I'm not going to even discuss their version of events. We're not going to discuss it because honestly, and I'm not somebody who is very crude or whatnot, but it is so fanciful, it is so imaginative, that really it's not even worth a dignified response. Just let them say what they're saying, and Allah will deal with them. For us, it is very clear what we believe. Nonetheless, questions do arise, and we have to then say they knew best what they thought was the best way to proceed. So what was the first tension? The first tension that's arisen is very simple. There are still a few thousand of the mobs that had come. Remember, maybe 6,000 people had come to protest against Uthman all the months, remember, that had taken place. They had come from all around after the Hajj. So there's still a few thousand of them. Now, the question arises, now these thousands did not actually kill Uthman. The actual killers of Uthman disappeared into the crowd. And to this day, we do not know their names. To this day, we do not know the names, because the actual 5-10 people who literally unsheathed the sword and did the deed in the house, we really don't know. They just literally did it, and then they fled into these thousands. Now definitely, maybe 30, 40, 50 knew who the 5 were. And maybe another 200 knew the 30 who knew the 5. You know how it goes. You know how it goes in these types of gatherings. So the question arises, what is to be done with these 5,000 people, angry mob that is still in Medina? And this is where the tensions arose. That Ali radiallahu anh thought that if he were to start fighting these 5,000 people, and the fact of the matter is that the bulk of them do not have Uthman's blood on their hands. What was their crime? To be a part of the crowd who protested Uthman radiallahu anh. They didn't actually storm the house. They didn't actually unsheath the sword. But they are, the Arabic term is ghawgha. They are the mobs. This is what the classical Arabic term, the ghawgha is just, they're the mobs. They were still there. So Ali radiallahu anh thought that if he were to fight them, he himself does not have those troops right now, number one. Number two, Islam has not yet seen the civil war. Never has a sword been unsheathed against another Muslim. Remember this, right? Never has actually two Muslim armies fought together, right? And number three, there are interpretations as well that the Emperor of Constantinople, the Roman Emperor, was monitoring this, and he was thinking of launching an attack if the Muslims are engaged in civil war. There's talk like this as well in some of the books. And so, for whatever reason, Ali radiallahu anh decided that it's just not wise to take on these thousands of people right now. It's going to cause more chaos and damage in the long run. And by the way, I mean, even in modern times, by the way, it's very common after a massacre or a civil war, the government says, okay, amnesty for all, because we can't go back and figure out who did what. Then everybody's going to be guilty of something. So I just came back from South Africa, and in South Africa there was some brutal apartheid for 50, 60 years. There were massacres, there were riots, there were secret police doing this and killing people and imprisoning whatnot. When Nelson Mandela came to power, one of the things that he did in 1994, he established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, right? And this was a very wise step, that he made it basically the rule of law, that if you came and you confessed your crime and you documented it, essentially you'll be forgiven. Why? Because if he were to start jailing everybody who participated in the government, because this is now, it was legal, like in Nazi Germany as well, the Nuremberg trials and whatnot. It was legal to do what they were doing in apartheid. If he were to go after every policeman, every this, every that, I mean, it would have caused a type of riot and backlash that fragile South Africa would have been eliminated, right? And so at the time he was roundly criticized, Nelson Mandela, he was roundly criticized. But in hindsight, it really was the act of a true leader, because he even forgave his own captors. You know this. Nelson Mandela forgave the very people who signed his, whatever, torture and imprisonment or whatever. He forgave some of them, and he actually met with some of them. This is on YouTube video and whatnot. So in hindsight, we see this was a true leader, that in order to heal the wounds of South Africa, he had to move on. Now, if this is a modern example that we all understand, right? Then, wallahi, I trust Ali radiallahu anhu a million times more than Nelson Mandela. I trust the fiqh of Ali and the long sight of Ali radiallahu anhu a million times more than any other person. So maybe he saw some maslahah, that what, all of these thousands of people, their crime is guilt by association. And I can't charge them for that crime. I can't fight them for that crime. So I'll just have to basically move on and consolidate the ummah and see what I can. That was his niyyah. Now obviously this did not sit well with many of the senior Sahaba, many of them, not just the one you mentioned, even much more senior than him. And the most senior Sahaba in Medina were Talha and Zubayr. These were the most senior. So within a week or so, they visited Ali radiallahu anh, and they said that, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, An al-Waqt, it is now time to deal with the Qatalat Uthman, to deal with the people who killed Uthman. So Ali radiallahu anh said, I've just come, just right now, I just got into the office right now, give me some time. Give me some time, I cannot do anything right now. So they gave him some time, they came again, they said, okay, now it is time. And after a few weeks turned into months, Ali radiallahu anhu basically told them that, my dear brothers, ya ikhwata, my dear brothers, I'm not ignoring this matter, but what can I do against a people who possess more power than we do, and who have support amongst the Mawali and the A'rab? So the people who had complained against Uthman, see, this is the reality of the world, not just in that time, even in our time. It is very easy to rile up the masses. It's very easy to confuse the people. It's very easy when you become vulgar and coarse, like let's say Donald Trump. You can whet up people's appetite and make them angrier than they should be, right? And the intelligent, sane politicians don't do that. So their popularity is not that much, because only intelligent people, and I give you the example again of American politics. Look at some of the more intelligent politicians. Look at Bernie Sanders that we just like. I mean, at whatever you want to say, at least he's much more intelligent than any of the other candidates. But he's not popular. He cannot be popular. Why? Because what is he going to rile up against, right? He doesn't have that enemy, the type that Trump does, right? So these ghawgha, these mobs, they whetted up the people's appetite, and they're making complaints against complaints, so they had attracted even larger following. So Ali radiallahu anh said, if I attack them, I become the enemies of even more people than these 5,000, because they have mass support. So he said, what do you expect me to do? And as for the qatala of Uthman themselves, the actual people, find me who they are, get the witnesses, and I'll be the first to do it. So Ali radiallahu anh is not talking about the actual murderers. Of course, everybody's in agreement that the actual murderers should be executed. But who knows who they are? We still don't know to this day. Who knows where they went and disappeared? They're just, again, they went into their hiding and whatnot. And so this tension continued to increase, that the inactivity of Ali radiallahu anh for a wisdom that he saw became a cause of frustration, human nature, amongst other of the Sahaba who loved Uthman radiallahu anh. Everybody loved Uthman, Ali loved Uthman, we mentioned, but they felt that Ali radiallahu anh was not doing enough. And as the weeks turned into months, 4 months went by. And Aisha and some of the other mothers of the believers were still in Mecca. Why were they in Mecca? Remember, Uthman had given them permission to perform Hajj. After many, many years, they had actually gone for Hajj. So all of them had gone for Hajj. Then the siege begins, so they stay. Then the news comes of Uthman's death, so they stay, because obviously these are the mothers of the believers. It is not even befitting that they walk into this chaos. Their protection is of paramount importance. The highest priority of the ummah is to protect our mothers. How can they walk back to this chaos situation in Medina? So they're waiting in Mecca for things to stabilize. So Aisha radiallahu anha is in Mecca. She is in Mecca. And Talha and Zubayr then leave Medina and go to Mecca, ostensibly to perform Umrah, maybe even to talk to Aisha. And this is when they began to discuss what can be done, that this inactivity is simply not acceptable in their eyes. And the Qatalat Uthman, the notion was, or the statement was, they're still wandering free amongst us, they're walking the streets untouched. How can we allow the blood of Uthman to be so cheap? And it became basically the call for the Dam Uthman to be avenged, right? Islamically avenged. How can the blood of Uthman radiallahu anh not be avenged? And again, Ali radiallahu anh, it's not as if he doesn't want to, but the question is, again, how? So that, as they say, the devil is in the details. Each one wants the same, but the question is how to get there. And so the discussion began that what is to be done, and for reasons that are still being debated, we're still trying to wonder why, the three of them, meaning Aisha and Talha and Zubair, very senior all of them, radiallahu anhum, they decided to march to Basra. Now why? Again, people have differed. One theory, one interpretation, which we find in the classical books, is that some of the senior Sahaba and military commanders were in Basra, So they thought that if they went to Basra, they could get military support, which Ali did not have in Medina, and then they could go fight the Qatalat Uthman. They could then take on the mobs. This is one understanding. Another understanding is that they felt that even Mecca is too dangerous because it's close to Medina, that they need to find a neutral place or a third space, if you like, that is safe for them, and they can begin negotiations. Whatever is the actual reason, it is explicitly mentioned by Aisha radiallahu anha and Talha and Zubayr that the goal was to bring about a reconciliation between the tension rising parties within the ummah, because there are people that are very frustrated about the killing of Uthman radiallahu anh. Now we haven't even begun the discussion of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. That we will discuss next week inshaAllah. Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, he is of course a cousin of Uthman, and he is also the most powerful governor at the time, and he has been in Syria for over 20 years, and he has complete control. He has an army, he has popularity. And Muawiyah radiallahu anh, now this is awkward to say, but he did not give the oath of allegiance to Ali until he said, I will give you the oath as soon as you kill the Qatalat Uthman. That's my condition. I have no problems giving the oath, but my cousin's death needs to be avenged. So that was a major source of tension. So that's happening. We're not going to talk about this week. That'll be inshallah next week, inshallah, go over that. So you have one issue over here, and you have other Sahaba who, they don't agree with not giving bay'ah to Ali, but they don't agree with not doing anything. As I said, there's more than one perspective here. And so the notion comes, let's go to a third space, let's go to another place, and that's Basra. And Basra, if you remember, is one of the earliest of the establishments in the time of Umar al-Khattab, and it had now, of course, a good critical mass of Sahaba and good people there. There's also a theory, by the way, that some of the Qatalat Uthman had gone back to Basra, and so Aisha and Talha and Zubayr, they felt that if they went there, they could deal with them directly as well. Again, why would they go to Basra? Allah knows the actual reason. These are some theories that are given. Nonetheless, the notion came that they're all going to go to Basra radiallahu anhu ajma'in. And Aisha radiallahu anha, she, as you know, there are special laws of hijab about the mothers of the believers. The mothers of the believers, our mothers, they can never be seen in public. Even their outer body can never be seen in public. They have to have a special layer of protection. And this is what the Quran calls hijab. This is, I mentioned this many times in this masjid and many places. When we say hijab, we mean the Arabic khimar, right? The Arabic khimar, the headscarf, we call it hijab. That's fine, no problem. Just realize what the Quran says khimar, that's the hijab we call. When the Quran says hijab, it means an actual curtain between the mothers of the believers and the everybody else, non-mahrams, right? Obviously their maharim could enter into the curtain. So Urwa ibn al-Zubayr, the grand-nephew of Aisha, would lift up their curtain, go back inside and speak to Aisha, then come back out and tell the Sahaba what they needed to know. So Urwa and others would enter the curtain because they're mahram. But everybody who's not mahram, there's an actual curtain between the wives of the Prophet ﷺ and the other Sahaba. And when they are outside, they are in a special hawdaj. What is a hawdaj in English? It's like a mini tent on a camel. It's like a mini encampment, if you like, that they're sitting in that. And so Aisha radiallahu anha, her camel basically was well recognized because it's the only camel that has that special hawdaj on it. It has special, you know what I'm talking about here, that mini tent structure, right? Is there even a word in English for it? I don't even know a word in English. I don't think the Americans would have had a word for that type of encampment on a camel's back. But the point being that she's on that special camel, so everybody can see that that is Aisha, meaning that's the camel of Aisha, and she's inside that hawdaj, right? So she has a special camel. It was a very beautiful camel. It was also decorated because it is Aisha's camel, and it has that hawdaj on it. So the goal was that Aisha radiallahu anha, walking and marching, not walking but meaning riding, and being outside for this cause will generate support for the cause. And this is well understood psychologically. When you have such a high profile personality, then people's support will come. And that's exactly what happened. Probably 500-600 people left Mecca with Talha, Aisha and Zubayr. By the time they got to Basra, At-Tabari and others say they were 30,000 strong. Do the math. From 600 to 30,000. So they're gaining support and they're gaining momentum for their cause, and the goal is to demonstrate, very much like we have protests or whatnot, to demonstrate to Ali radiallahu anh that we need to do this now, and we have the critical mass to fight these ghawgha, the riffraff, the crowd. And so this is very explicit, we as Sunnis believe that it is impossible to even think that Aisha radiallahu anha intended to fight Ali. That never even crossed their minds. And especially Talha and Zubayr, they had given their bay'ah to Ali. It is impossible that they would have thought that this is a gathering of an army to fight against Ali. This is not our narrative. It is the narrative of the other group, you understand? But our narrative, nobody says this. Nobody from our side. This is not even a valid interpretation. Because it is nonsensical to believe that Ali radiallahu anh and Aisha intended to go to war together. Ibn Taymiyyah writes that Aisha herself never fought, nor even did she have the niyyah of fighting when she left Mecca. She didn't even come in her mind. Rather, she felt that in order to bring about some type of reconciliation, her presence would benefit the believers. But later on, this is Ibn Taymiyyah, but later on she realized that if she had remained and not done that, it would have been better. And every time she recalled the incident of the camel, she would cry until her khimar, her scarf, would become wet. And the same applies for the rest of the Sahaba, Talha and Zubayr and Ali. None of them intended for the day of the camel to become a battle. But fighting broke out in the ranks without their choice. And this is the position of Al-Dhahabi and Ibn Kathir, and basically every Sunni scholar. The only difference of opinion is from the other side, and frankly, we're not interested in their narrative, especially at this level of our lecture. So Aisha radiallahu anha, she begins to march in the Hawdaj, and slowly but surely as they're going through, everybody hears of the cause, more and more people join. We need the vengeance for the dam of Uthman. We want to bring about the killers of Uthman and call them to justice. Now there's an interesting hadith mentioned here. It is said that when Aisha was outside of Basra and it was the night and the caravan was proceeding, they passed by an oasis and they could hear the barking of dogs. So Aisha said, "What oasis is this?" So she was told it is the oasis of Hawab, outside of Basra. So Aisha said, "I feel that our mission will not succeed." She had a premonition, "I feel that our mission will not succeed." They said, no, you will go to Basra and the Muslims will be united under you. She said, "No, I remember one day the Prophet ﷺ said to me, or said to us, all of us were sitting there, his wives, said, what shall be the state of one of you, ihdakunna, one of you wives, what is going to be your state when the dogs of Hawab will be barking at them?" Meaning it's not a positive thing, that state is not a positive thing. What is going to be your affairs when the dogs of Hawab will be barking at them? And this hadith is graded Sahih by Al-Albani and others. And Imam Al-Dhahabi and others say there is no question that Aisha deeply regretted her decision to depart for Basra and her participation in the battle of Jamal, and she never assumed that the matter would reach what it reached. So this is again very clear from our perspective. In any case, they reached Basra in Rabi'ul Awwal of 36th AH. So it's around 4 months after the death of Uthman radiallahu anh. So literally after the Bay'ah of Ali, within a few months now, this battle of Jamal takes place, and they reach Basra, and they are, according to Al-Tabari, 30,000 strong. And there are other reports that say other figures, as you know, who's doing statistics and numbering at this time, but an army too large to count. Now the governor of Basra panicked because he sees 30,000 armed men and he has no clue what's going on. Like, why are you doing this? What's going on? The governor of Basra panicked, and he sent out a expeditionary skirmishing party. The issue got tense between them, and some swords were drawn and some lives were lost, but it wasn't an all-out war yet. This is basically the skirmishing party that came out. They lost some lives, and Aisha and others managed to march into Basra, and it was unclear now who is in control. Is it the governor of Basra, who is loyal to Ali, or is it Aisha and their 30,000 people? So the governor of Basra says, I'm not doing anything till Ali himself comes. Basically, he wanted to bring Ali directly and say, you deal with this, I don't know what to do. So he insists that Ali radiallahu anhu come down to Basra and deal with the situation. And so Ali radiallahu anhu, he was diverted from dealing with Muawiyah, and he goes to Basra. He was thinking about dealing with Muawiyah, because Muawiyah, we're going to talk about him next week, and what is the reality. And so Ali radiallahu anhu then went to Basra. Now he already had a force with him, and that force was initially intended for Muawiyah, but now he's marching up to deal with this issue in Basra. And when he gets to Basra, or not actually the city, when he's outside of Basra by a day or so, he sends an envoy, an emissary, very famous. He's not a Sahabi, he's a Tabi'i, by the name of Al-Qa'qa' ibn Amr. And Al-Qa'qa' was one of the main commanders of Qadisiyya, and he was one of the famous commanders who had done many of the conquests and the victories. A very noble, respected person. And he sends Al-Qa'qa' to negotiate, and he enters in upon Aisha. Obviously, whenever I say enters upon Aisha, I mean behind the hawdaj or the hijab. No Sahabi is allowed to see Aisha, even her outer body, even in the hijab. You cannot. That's our sharia. All the mothers of the believers, except for the Maharim. So he speaks, you can speak, by the way, you can speak with the mothers of believers, as Allah says in the Quran, that وَإِذَا سَأَلْتُمُوهُنَّ مَتَاعًا فَاسْأَلُوهُنَّ مِنْ وَرَاءِ حِجَابٍ. When you ask them for anything, ask them from behind a curtain. So the Sahaba are speaking to Aisha radiallahu anha, but from behind a actual curtain. So Al-Qa'qa' enters it upon Aisha and says that, Ya Ummah, oh my mother, what is the matter? Why have you come all the way here? And Aisha says, we have come to seek revenge for the death of Uthman. This is our goal. We have come to seek revenge. This is our demand. That's why we have all of these people here. We demand that you take care of the qatalat of Uthman, and that we want to bring about reconciliation. So Aisha felt that if her demands were met, that she could deal with even Muawiyah radiallahu anhu would be then unified, right? So she's becoming a third party in order to bring about a sulh between everybody. And she feels, because of her status and persona, and that was what she was told as well. Talha and Zubair said the same thing, that if you just go there and the people see you, everybody will respect you. Can I remember, by the way, Aisha and all of the mothers of the believers have lived completely apolitical lives, right? And when a person lives completely apolitical, then becomes into politics, generally speaking, they have a cleaner slate and people look up to them as it is. What do you think of Aisha? And she is our mother, and she is the beloved of the Prophet ﷺ. How much respect would she have? So this was the point, that look, for 35 years, you have been living a life of ibadah and zuhd and cut off. Now people will see you, it will remind them, it will bring back your status, your hayba, your maqam. It will bring back the people. That was the goal that Aisha had, to bring about sulh between all of these parties. So Qa'qa' then demanded to see Talha and Zubair. They also came. So Talha, Zubair, Aisha and Qa'qa', they're all over there discussing. And for 3 days, the emissary goes back and forth with the demands, back and forth, whatnot. And finally, a compromise is actually reached. After 3 days of negotiations, a compromise is reached. And essentially what it demanded was that Ali radiallahu anhu get rid of all of the mobs and the crowds from around Medina, and to expel from his ranks anybody who was known to have sympathized with the protesters. Right? Now realize this is a very large amount of people, and the demand was anybody who from that camp, because there were many who were in the camp of Ali then, that they were of those who protested against Uthman. And one of the conditions was that cut off all relations with that entire thousands of people. And they actually even had names specifically. This person was known to be a protester, and now he's a supporter of yours and he's in your army. We don't want any of them. That was one of the conditions. And then the other condition was that now you have to find the actual killers, do the investigation, find who they are, and then punish them. So basically, the conditions were agreed upon within 3 days. Back and forth. Ali radiallahu anh is a day's away outside of Basra, basically half a day outside of Basra, and Aisha is inside of Basra. So al-Qa'a between the two of them finally comes to this agreement, and alhamdulillah, it seemed to be very positive now. And Ibn Kathir writes from his Tariq. Ibn Kathir is one of our most famous historians, and he's written one of the most definitive histories, obviously from the Sunni perspective, Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya. This is a 10-volume or 8-volume book, massive book, and this is the most comprehensive and analytical medieval history ever written. And it's one of the greatest books of history of our tradition. Straight from that book he writes, Ibn Kathir writes, so on that night, meaning on the third night, both camps went to their bed completely satisfied with the outcome and happy that reconciliation had been reached. So everything appears now to have been worked. But the killers of Uthman and the mobs had the worst night, and they plotted a plan and they agreed to start a fitna. So the same people that had basically instigated the killing of Uthman decided that this is not heading in the direction that they want it to head, and so they agreed to commit a very evil, heinous tactic, which is well known, and every book of history mentions this, that in the middle of the night, when both camps were asleep, around 2,000 of these mobs, 2,000 of the same groups that had been sympathetic to the killers of Uthman, they split up, 1,000 here, 1,000 there, and they launched a surprise attack on each one of them, on each of the two groups. And they began to claim that they are from the other group. They began to claim that they are from the other group. And this is killing literally in the middle of the night in cold blood. So you can imagine what the response would have been. Each side assumed that the other side had betrayed. Each side, especially the soldiers and the commanders on the ground, they just assumed that this is a betrayal of the highest magnitude. And therefore, immediately they came to arms, and a battle ensued that lasted for most of that day. And much blood was shed. In fact, so much blood was shed that we don't even have a actual number of how many people died. And Al-Hasan ibn Ali, the son of Ali, Hasan ibn Ali, the grandson of the Prophet ﷺ, we have an authentic report from him. He said that I checked on my father to make sure he was safe when the battle was at its peak. This is the day of Jamal. I checked on my father and I found him basically almost in tears, crying. And he is saying, Ya Hassan, how I wish I had died 20 years before this day. Like, how can this be happening now? We have Aisha on one side and me on the other side. And this was the very first actual civil war in Islam. The very first time where you had Muslims on both sides killing Muslims. And in this chaos, we don't even know how many people died. At-Tabari estimates 10,000 10,000 people. 10,000 dead. That is, our Eid is 5,000, double that. Just imagine 10,000 dead in one day of battle because of the chaos, because of the anger, because all of this. And subhanAllah, the two of the deaths were so tragic that they eclipsed all 10,000. And of course, these are the two deaths of the two greatest Sahaba alive, and that is Talha and Zubayr. Talha and Zubayr, they both met their ends on this day. As for Talha, and the both of them were in their 70s or late 60s. Talha was 70 something and Zubayr was 60 something. Literally, they're now old men now. As for Talha, he was on his horse, running through the battlefield, telling them to sheathe your swords, stop fighting. Like he's trying to stop them because clearly something is wrong. And he's telling them to stop fighting. And out of nowhere, an arrow came and it went so deep into his thigh that it slashed open one of the main arteries of his thigh, and it bled so profusely that he died of bleeding. The blood was, the wound was so deep that he basically died of bleeding. And the other side claims that Marwan ibn al-Hakam was the one who fired the arrow. Marwan al-Hakam, of course, is eventually going to become the Khalifa after Yazid and his son Muawiyah. Marwan becomes the Khalifa, right? The other side claims Marwan was the one who did this. But that doesn't make any sense, and Allah knows. Ibn Kathir says that people say this, but this is not true. We don't know who killed him. It was just an arrow that was shot and it came out. And when Ali radiallahu anh eventually found the body of Talha, he held it up with his own hands and he wiped the dust from the face of Talha. And he said, to Allah, I complain of my situation. How I wish I had died before this day. Like, how can I see this, happening in front of my eyes? And as for Az-Zubayr, reports differ. There is one report that is somewhat controversial, but I will say it anyway, and it's found in many Sunni books, so I'll say it anyway. It is said that Ali sent Zubayr a message on this day that, don't you remember one day the Prophet ﷺ predicted that you would be fighting me? Now, Zubayr and Ali are cousins, distant cousins. They're all from the Banu Hashim, the Quraysh, right? So Zubayr and Ali, they knew each other from back in the day, and they were obviously very close as well. So Ali said to him, radiallahu anh, don't you remember that one day the Prophet ﷺ said to you that you would be fighting me and you would be in the wrong? You would be fighting me and you would be in the wrong? And Zubayr allegedly said, I say allegedly because the hadith scholars differ, is it authentic or not? It is found in our tradition. It's a Sunni hadith. Whether it's authentic or not is the question. Some ulama say it's da'if, some say it's hasan. It's basically in that gray area. So when Zubayr got this message, he said, I have only remembered this hadith right now. Like, meaning completely I forgot about this until right now you reminded me. And so Zubayr put his sword back and left the battlefield. He did not participate. Now the other version says that he simply decided not to participate anyway and he left. Both versions say Zubayr turned his back and walked away from the battlefield. Right? The one version says he turned away because of the hadith. The other version says he turned away because he didn't want to kill other Muslims. Both versions say Zubayr did not participate. Even Talha did not participate. He was running around on his horse telling them to stop and to calm down. These Sahaba are too big to fight themselves against other Muslims. They did not do that. So Zubayr radiallahu anh did not participate. However, one of the senior most of the rabble rousers and of the Qatal of Uthman, the sympathizers, and his name is well known, and it's something that we don't know him, most of you have never heard of, but he is well known that he was of those who was always instigating. He saw Zubayr walk out, so he made it his goal that I'm going to kill Zubayr ibn al-Awwam. So he followed Zubayr, and that night when Zubayr was praying tahajjud, in that night, not in the battlefield, that night when Zubayr was praying tahajjud, he surprised him and executed him, killed him as he was praying tahajjud. And so Zubayr radiallahu anh also died a shaheed on the night of the day of the camel. Right? Talha on the day of the camel, Zubayr the same night from the same people. So that's why it's essentially the same battle that brought his death. Right? He was there. One of the other side saw him leave, and he goes, "I'm not going to let this guy go. He's going to be." Everybody knows Zubayr, so they followed him and they killed. Now, as for Zubayr ibn al-Awwam, there are authentic ahadith in Sahih Bukhari and others, authentic ahadith that. Bashir Qatalat ibn Safiya bin Nar. Give glad tidings. It's used sarcastically in the hadith and the Quran sometimes. Bashir is sometimes used as a somewhat of a sarcastic thing. To the one who kills the son of Safiya, right? With the fire of hell. Give glad tidings to the one who kills the son of Safiya with the fire of hell. So when Ali heard of this, that Zubayr has been killed, he said, go give glad tidings to the killer that he shall be in Jahannam. Go give glad tidings to the killer that the one who killed him will be in Jahannam. So Ali radiallahu anhu managed to basically quell the battle, and he announced amongst his troops that no more killing. Anybody who flees shall be unharmed. Anybody who does not fight shall be unharmed. Anybody who is in a house shall be unharmed. Anybody who walks without weapons shall be unharmed. Meaning, don't kill anybody unless they are attacking you. Everybody else should be safe. And he gathered up all of the ghanima, the booty that had been captured by his troops, and he put it in the masjid. And he said, whoever it belongs to, come and take it. Meaning, his troops did not get the ghanima, because this was not a jihad. In the eyes of Ali ibn radiallahu anhu, it was not a jihad. It was not a legitimate jihad. So any battle, war booty that had been acquired, he put it in the masjid for display, and he goes, whoever is the rightful owner or the waratha, the inheritors, they should go and pick their stuff up and take it back. And as for Aisha radiallahu anha, she was given the utmost honor by Ali radiallahu anhu, and he visited her. It is said that he visited her in the Hawdaj, and he said to her, may Allah forgive you. And her reply was, and may Allah forgive you as well. I only intended sulh, meaning I did not intend all that this happened. Right? So no doubt there are obviously, we have talked about this previously, there's no doubt that the seerah indicates that Aisha and Ali radiallahu anhum, there was some very trivial tensions between them from a number of incidents, and this is common between many people, and especially in this nature, but there's no hatred or animosity. And now that this battle has finished, so Ali makes a dua for her that may Allah forgive you, and she replies, may Allah forgive you as well, that I only intended sulh. Now we also have a very interesting hadith in Mustadrak of al-Hakim. We have a very interesting hadith in the Mustadrak of al-Hakim, which is considered authentic by al-Hakim and al-Dhahabi and others. And it is that one day the Prophet ﷺ was sitting, Ali was sitting in the house of Aisha, and she was behind the veil, and the Prophet ﷺ was there. And the Prophet ﷺ said to Ali that there shall be an amr, a matter between the two of you. There shall be some tension, something that happens between the two of you, between you and her. And he pointed towards the curtain, and there was Aisha behind that. And Ali radiallahu anhu said, if that ever happens, then I am the worst of the two. I'm the worst of the two. How could I have a tension or a fight with how could anything happen between me and her? I'm the worst of the two. And the Prophet said, no, la. But when that happens, فَرُدَّهَا إِلَى مَأْمَنِهَا, take her back to her place of safety. This hadith is in Al-Hakim's Mustadrak, our book. And this is exactly what Ali radiallahu anhu did. That again, what does the hadith say? That a time will come when there shall be some type of matter, tension. The hadith says amr, and amr, as the Arabs know, it basically means something of substance. And typically it's used in a negative sense, right? There's going to be a dispute or something like this, we should say. And Ali said, if that ever happens, I'm the worst, that I'm the lesser of the two. And the Prophet said, no, I'm not saying that, but when it does happen, then I ask you to return her to her place of safety, which is her house and her in Medina. So when the battle basically finished, Ali radiallahu anh basically asked her to or gave the largest house of Basra. He vacated it and he gave it to Aisha and her entourage, and he made sure that she was well taken care of, and he visited her for the few days that she was in Basra. And while he was in those days in Basra, he was told that some people are saying bad things of Aisha, that she caused this, she did this, and all the blame is on her. So he gave the hukum, the command, that anybody who speaks ill of Aisha should be lashed 100 times. Anybody who speaks ill of Aisha should be lashed. So the punishment was actually carried out on a number of people who were basically blaming everything on, not saying, now what were they saying? The astaghfirullah, they weren't saying astaghfirullah, the slander. That's not even possible for any Muslim to say. They were basically saying that this is all her fault and she caused it all, and if she had not, so they're basically putting the blame on her. And Ali radiallahu anh said, whoever disrespects Aisha should be lashed 100 times. So that basically was implemented in the city of Basra. Then he gathered an entourage to send her back, whoever would be with her, and he commanded 40 of the noble ladies of Basra. So he chose 40 of the noble families, their daughters or wives or whatever, to be her entourage, and then men to basically protect them. So obviously that there's safety, there's no shubha, there's nobody thinking bad that she's going alone with strange men, because Talha and Zubair have been killed, right? And many of her party have been killed. So there was more casualties on Aisha's side because Ali has the prepared army, right? There's more casualties, and especially the senior members of Aisha's entourage are all gone now. Especially Talha and Zubair, they're now gone. So who's going to bring her back? So he chose 40 of the noble ladies of Basra to basically be her, just a protective, just so that nobody says anything bad or anything. And then of course you have the warriors and the people that are going to guard this entourage. And he appointed the brother of Aisha, and that is Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr. He appointed the brother of Aisha to be the leader of the caravan. So that's her mahram in the caravan. And he then commanded that they go back to Medina. And it is reported that before she left Basra, she said to the people that, "O people, do not backbite one another," meaning stop saying anything bad about any other Muslim. Do not backbite one another, for whatever kalam, whatever speech is between Ali and myself is the speech that happens between a woman and her in-laws. And he is of the Salihin. And this is the Sunni perspective on the whole issue, which is the middle path, by the way. A lot of modern Sunni historians, they try to sugarcoat and they want to say there was nothing. And to me it is very obvious that there were some tensions between the two. And so what if they were? So what? It is human nature to have these types of tensions. And look at the fiqh of Aisha. Look at her maturity, that she says, every family has tensions with the in-laws. This is human nature. And Ali is my in-law, isn't he? Right? Is the brother-in-law almost. Is like basically a type of in-law to me. And so yes, we've had issues just like everybody has with the in-laws, but he is of the Salihin. I'm not doubting his iman. I'm not doubting he's not, astaghfirullah, a bad person. He is of the Salihin. And when this reached Ali radiallahu anh, he said, and this is well known, mutawatir from Ali, this statement is mutawatir. He said, Sadaqat, she has spoken the truth. Fawallahi, I swear by Allah, innaha la zawjatu nabiyyikum fi dunya wal akhirah. The woman here, this lady, she is the wife of your Prophet in this dunya and in the akhirah. How can you say anything bad about her, right? She has spoken the truth, that look, anything that happened between us is just minor tension. It wasn't meant to be anything more than this. It's just kalam that happens between in-laws all the time. We're not doubting each other's iman or character or anything. And this is as I said, the unanimously agreed upon Sunni narrative. And in fact, in some books of history it is mentioned that he accompanied the caravan outside the city, and then he commanded Hassan and Hussein to walk the rest of the day with the caravan as an honor to the caravan, that this has Aisha in it. And then of course they came back and the caravan continued on to Medina. And it is narrated in Ibn Abi Shaybah and many other books of hadith, and Ibn Taymiyyah mentions this narration. I mentioned that whenever Aisha used to talk about the battle of the camel, it is called, of course, I forgot to mention the most obvious thing. Why is it called the battle of the camel? Because Aisha's camel was one of the most prominent icons of the whole battle, right? Aisha's camel was a central piece, and people were protecting it, and so that's like in the center of the battlefield. In fact, the camel itself was injured because of an arrow that came in. So that's very dangerous. Imagine when Allah protected our mother, but just imagine the camel itself is injured because an arrow is coming. So our mother's on that camel. But It was called the Battle of the Camel because of the prominence of Aisha's camel, because of the central role. Typically, you don't find a woman's camel on the battlefield, do you? You don't find the Hawdaj. So because it was there, it's called the Battle of the Camel. And anytime Aisha remembered the Battle of the Camel and talked about it, she would begin to cry until her khimar would become wet with her tears. And she regretted doing this because it unintentionally led to what it led to. It was not in the knee of anybody, but obviously if that had not happened, if she had not gone, then that would not have developed into this reality. Unfortunately, this was the first of a much worse battle that's going to take place. This was the first of two civil wars. This one was fully unintentional. The same cannot be said so easily of the second one. The second one is a little bit more complicated, and clearly both sides were armed to fight. And what exactly happened and how and whatnot, we'll talk about inshallah next Wednesday. But this battle is a bit easier to discuss because we can clearly say, and this, as I said, is the clear narrative, neither side actually wanted a physical combat with the other. Aisha radiallahu anha felt that her presence and her rallying call was like a mass protest, and it would bring about a tipping point that Ali would understand radiallahu anhu that we have to do this. And in fact, it did work to a certain extent. It did work in that Ali radiallahu anhu agreed to these demands, and he goes, okay, we're going to get rid of all of these people, and the next order of duty will be to hunt down the killers of Uthman. But now obviously this massacre, 10,000 people, it made it even more tense in the Muslim world at the time. And unfortunately this led to the greatest disaster of the first 40 years of Islam, and that is the Battle of Siffin between Muawiyah radiallahu anh and Ali radiallahu anh, and that will be inshallah next Wednesday. One final point, obviously the other side, non-Sunni side, is extremely clear in its verdict on Aisha radiallahu anha and Talha and Zubair, and from their perspective this makes these three in particular figures that are maybe even outside the fold of Islam. And for us to accuse Aisha of this is just as worse of a blasphemy as what they are doing. So for us, we are very clear to accuse Aisha radiallahu anha in particular of something. I mean, this is really, anybody who says this or believes this, we have to doubt this person's iman, because Aisha is too high of a maqam. And from our perspective, everybody who participated, especially in the Battle of the Camel, there is no question, nobody wanted blood. It was not even the intended goal. Obviously from their side, you should just know it. It was planned from day one. The Battle of the Camel was planned as a battle. And the three of them that we respect, from their perspective, they wanted to engage and even kill Ali. This is their perspective. And this is ludicrous. I mean, Talha and Zubair, their bay'ah was to Ali. I mean, it's impossible. They did not say, we no longer give bay'ah to Ali. They didn't break their bay'ah. They didn't join Muawiyah. They're simply saying, we disagree with the delay and we want to have Qatl Uthman taken care of right now. And in any case, inshallah, we come to the end of the Battle of the Jamal. Inshallah, next Wednesday we will do the Battle of Siffin, inshallah. Any quick questions that I'm going to try to evade as much as possible and just gloss over, because it's best not to go too deep. But Bismillah.
So, this is the question. There told me something you didn't even touch upon it, that you may tell us. There was apparently an army coming in to save Abu Usman from Muawiyah's side. Apparently, that's what I've read. And this will come up down the line again as to why it did not show up when apparently he knew this was happening. Did you come across in your reading of such an army, and what was the reason it did not show up to protect Abu Usman as well?
This is one of these far-fetched theories that doesn't seem to make any sense whatsoever. Uthman radiallahu anh, the actual siege lasted between 20 to 25 days. Okay? And it only got extremely bad maybe the last week when they cut off food and water from him. So from Medina to Damascus, minimum 2 weeks travel. So you do the math.
This was all a quick event, or this had been a simmering complaint against Abu Sufyan?
No. So the complaints are going on for years, but the mobs gathered after Hajj somewhat spontaneously, right? So the assumption that Muawiyah radiallahu anh knew this and he has an army coming to attack, it's one of these far-fetched theories that doesn't have any legitimate basis to it. Okay. Inshallah, we'll pause here, inshallah, then resume next Wednesday. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.